Ba, 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 ba. This is the final word coming to you for what may be the 1,382nd time. Geoff Lemon and Adam Collins celebrating, kind of, sort of, close to the pin, our 10-year anniversary. A little show with a difference, a pre-show before we get into something that we've dug up from the archives. But it's just about 10 years. We realised, actually, Adam, that the true 10-year anniversary would be the 23rd of July. And that would be in the middle of a test match, and that would be followed immediately by another test match. So we thought probably best to get that stuff out of the way before we do anything self-indulgent. But cricket's a milestone game, and 10 years is a milestone worth looking at.
It is. Hi, Geoff. You could argue it's the 7th of July if you want to as well, because that's when we recorded our demo, which is going out today. So I think the 23rd of July might have been the first one where we were a bit more like legit. And by that, I mean, it was the day after the Lord's Test match. We had a studio, we had proper microphones. And after that initial demo that went on, I think we put it on Soundcloud at about 11 p.m. the night before the test match in classic final word fashion, about 12 hours after it was recorded, with Vish and Will sat in one of the corporate boxes of the tavern stand. I remember exactly where we were, which we'll play through later. But yeah, what did you say? 1,382, is it?
That's my estimate. I mean, it's a little bit. You have to squint with some of the numbers, because we've got. If you just open a podcast app, it'll give you a number. But we do our own accounting with, there are some things that were reposts of other people's shows that ended up on our feed and that kind of thing. And being sticklers for stats, I've tried to keep a record of that sort of stuff over the years, so that we're not counting ones that that shouldn't go into our pile, I suppose. So that's where I've landed. There's probably a margin of error of half a dozen in either direction, and different apps count things differently. But broadly, it's somewhere around there.
Should we have a dart before we do some acknowledgements, thank yous, and that type of thing, as you might expect on a show like this, at how many hours or minutes? So if it's 1382, are we looking at, I don't know, would 30 to 40% of that be dailies, or not that much?
I think by now it'd probably be more than that, wouldn't it?
Let's
be half.
Let's call it 50% for the sake of the hypothetical. Let's call it 650 eps at 25 minutes?
What's average? Yeah, I mean, there've definitely been
some are longer, some are shorter.
But there've been some. They were supposed to be 15 originally. I don't think we've ever done a 15-minute daily. I think they've been 18 at the shortest, and usually more like 24.
Only when pressed for time. So that's 16 to 50 minutes, and then what does that leave us? So if that's 650, whatever I punched in then, 1382. Take 16,
75, 80 minutes.
Take 650. That means I've got 732 remaining of the long one, 732 at an hour. Would that be fair on average?
I'd say more like 80. I don't think we've done many that have been
That's true.
under an hour. And there were definitely some 2-hour ones back in the beginning.
So that's 58. Hang on, this is great radio. 58,560. So if you add 58,560 to this is not going well. 560 is about as well as you expect it might go with me doing this on the tools as we go. Plus 16, 250. I'm committed to the bit now. I'm committed to the bit.
74,
nearly 75,000 minutes.
Okay.
Or hours.
Which means
minutes or hours? 75,000 minutes. There you go. What does that mean?
Which would be
means a lot.
1,000 and something hours.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure that we've completely landed the maths here, but somebody, there's got to be a
Someone
way
will.
to. It's not all there. Some of the YouTube backend stuff will do like how many hours people have spent watching your things, but that doesn't count how many hours your things are. And of course, a lot of it wasn't videoed early on. That didn't really start until 2020. That Boxing Day. Test was when we first regularly started doing that. I mean, the show, I think we're at about, 25 million downloads or something like that over the time, but that's really only the last 6 years, because the first 4 were pretty sporadic and pretty occasional. And it came from that idea from the draft episode, the pilot episode, the pitch episode, whatever you want to call it. That is the one that we're publishing today that we found. So it managed to dig up the audio, which was pretty scrappy. So it's had a bit of digital remastering, if you will. It's gone back through the Dolby suite to get the levels worked out and the volume even and so on. But it was so there was a point where we were at that stage we were pitching to the ABC that they should have a podcast around the Ashes, everything being fairly disorganized. It didn't happen after the first test in 2015, and then eventually somebody said, well, you've got to make something so that we know what it's going to be like. You've got to give us an example. So we had White Line Wireless up and running at the time, and we said, all right, we're going to record this, we'll badge it as a White Line Wireless show, we'll put it out on those feeds, and then we'll send that to the ABC so that they can get a sense of what the conversation would be like. And so we roped in great friends of the show, Vithushan, Ehantharajah, Will Macpherson, and asked them to come and sit and chat with us. And it's actually pretty good, listening back to it. The voices are different. The approach is a little different, but a lot of it's broadly the same. A lot of the jokes are things that I could imagine those two saying today, and I was pleased to find that it was still entertaining and that we were still okay to listen to.
I got through about half of it and kind of felt like I had to switch it off for self-critical reasons. Although I didn't say anything that I felt howlingly embarrassed by, but the voice is different.
Yeah, which is a win.
I've retained my Australian accent clearly, but it's nowhere near as sharp and coarse as it was, if coarse is the right word for it, a decade ago. That'll happen living somewhere else for the majority of that time. The opinions are fine for the time that they were offered. I don't know whether all of them stack up now, but they were fine at the time. It was right at the time, as the modern journalistic maxim goes. So, I'm relaxed about it going out into the wide world. But judge us kindly. Yeah. Don't hold us to account for things that were said that were strident about players that went on to do other things. That's perfectly normal, and it would be the same for anyone. But those early days, I remember a few things. This episode was recorded a few days, well, probably a week after you'd arrived. I was in situ for about a week before that. I was at Kent for the tour game. You arrived between Kent and Essex. And as you arrived, I was fairly bullish about finding a place for you to stay that night, but I didn't quite seal the deal. That is where I hoped for us to stay fell through totally. And Dan Brettig, who's been on the show as often as anyone, said, well, you can just crash in the Airbnb that I've got. And I've been staying with Dan in the Caribbean for the test matches in Dominica and Jamaica that preceded it. So I'm like, well, that'll work. Dan does well on accommodation. He's said he'd house us for an evening. I had another mate coming who I could crash with after that. All's well that ends well. What we didn't anticipate was sleeping in a room that is almost certainly paid for by the hour. It was unquestionably a brothel, at least some of the time, that he's found on Airbnb, where Dan was in the bed, the single bed. I think you had the blanket in the corner, and I was kind of laying at the foot of the bed with a pillow or something like that, and it was freezing cold down in the sort of basement.
It was a division of resources. It was like there's one blanket, there's one bed, so the person who gets the bed doesn't get a blanket.
That's
the
it.
The person who gets the blanket doesn't get
a pillow.
I do well on a floor. I've slept on a lot of floors in my life. So
well, we have that summer. I mean, we stayed on Will's floor that summer. I remember sleeping on a floor in New Zealand when we didn't quite get the. Or it might have been I was sleeping with my jumper as my blanket. It's an emblem of how it was with us early days. That we just needed to find a way to patch it together. There was one night where you and I went out with Will and Vish with our bags, and we didn't really know where we were staying that night. And Will, at about 10 o'clock, goes, "Oh, well, I suppose you're staying on my floor." And we're like, we kind of hoped you'd say that. Yes. There was another where we did almost the exact same thing with Vish, where we were going to take a couch each, but you just stayed out till 7 a.m. I slept on the couch, and you came.
Oh, that was with the Russians,
bounding back through after a night with the Russians you met in the back of a taxi. So, it was a bit loose, a lot looser, but it was kind of ambitious because at the time, if you want to zoom out, there was one cricket podcast worth a pinch of shit, the World Cricket Show. There were. Well, that I was aware of anyway. And we all kind of independently had the idea that there's got to be something more than this. The ABC should be doing something more than like highlight recaps of the test playing day. This was thinking in the Australian context, by the way. There were other podcasts around, but not many at all. We couldn't ever quite break it open with the ABC. There was a moment a couple of years on from that where we got some feedback from a friend and colleague there who said they were talking about, it'd be really great if we had a cricket podcast on the ABC. And someone said, Geoff and Adam have been doing one for 3 years. He just wasn't aware of our presence, which was rather embarrassing, really, that we hadn't cut through even to that extent to management at ABC Towers there in Ultimo. So, yeah, it took a while. And then there was, Geoff, remember the year when we were going to make the pod, I think weekly was the plan in 2017, and we were flirting with Cricinfo, or ESPN Cricinfo, maybe ESPN Australia even. And we spent an entire year waiting for the starter's pistol, which never came. So the show kind of went
with
weirdly on hiatus.
We're just working on this. We're just lining this up, another 4 weeks or so. And it never
so it was a slow burn
through. Yeah. So there was a degree of pent up frustration when it came to, it was 2018 going to Dubai, when we went, okay, well, let's just do it ourselves. We'll figure out our own hosting. And that's when Jay Mueller and Astrid came into the picture with Bad Producer, their indie podcast label. You've got to get involved with an indie label if you've come out of pirate radio. And it was Jay particularly who was like, okay, let's push this. You have to do it every week, though, not just every week through the cricket season. You've got to continue it through the year. It was Jay who had the idea to spin off the numbers game into story time, into what it became, so that then there were 2 episodes a week, and on we went with them. And that was what really pushed us, gave us the discipline to go, we need to keep doing this on a regular basis if you're going to build an audience. And then 2019 came along at the right time with that bumper World Cup Ashes England summer, where the Daily Show became part of what we were doing as well. And that's more or less the configuration we've still got now.
Yeah, you think about that 2018 buying of the rights escapade and all the stories that flowed from that, how important it is to our story generally, that we were being written about around the world. It was a really weird thing to happen, and I'm proud of what we did then. But it was the catalyst for the Daily Show. The other inspiration for it, when I was in Zimbabwe in 2018, Johnny Liu was working for the Independent, and he'd put out on Twitter that he was involved in this daily World Cup football show, because the football World Cup was in Russia that year, and he and Jack Pitt-Brooke and a couple of others were making this 20-minute recap on what was going on. And I'm like, that would work really, really well for Test cricket, and indeed for a Cricket World Cup. So, of course, I was pitching it everywhere, unsuccessfully, in my usual way. You've got to throw a lot of darts to, or you got to kiss a lot of frogs to, find Prince Charming or whatever it is. And
to stab a frog with a dart. You've got to got to smoke a lot of darts to kiss a frog.
and I had one, by the way, who signed up to one frog, one commercial partner, one outlet who wanted to do the 19 World Cup with us, and in the end they kind of pinched the idea and did it themselves, which is fair enough. That's their prerogative. But we were in that headspace. But totally right with Jay and Astrid. Jay, who I happened upon, first of all, back in my politics days. He was the executive producer of Hot Breakfast on Triple M. He's still saved in my phone as J-Triple M Breakfast all these years later. He would call up or, say, can we get Wayne Swan on the program tomorrow? And we'd often get Wayne on there. And all these years later, when he was working at SEN in that, I guess it's the infamous Sandpaper series, he and I were working together. And over there, I'm like, I've got 2 things to say to you. One, Dan Breddick, who was on that tour as well, and I want to make a podcast about the 1993 AFL season. What do you reckon? And he's like, fuck it, let's do it. And then from that, when that was successful, I said, now this thing I do with Geoff, we really want to make it a winner, and couldn't have backed us any more enthusiastically. And I miss working with Jay. I miss Jay. It's not to say we're not still mates, but obviously our paths diverged when he took on other professional jobs that weren't so much in podcasting. And but yeah, he's an enormous part of our story, especially in those early days when we were trying to work out who we were.
And also that Jay and Astrid then introduced us to DC, to Dave Collins, no relation, who we still work with to this day, which is, it's beautiful to have that link, who's the gun editor who puts together so many of the episodes and makes sure that the awkward bits get taken out and the audio gets improved when when it's sometimes arrived in some pretty ropey states and situations, depending on where we've had to record over the years. I sort of enjoy those comments sometimes from people who go, "Oh, it's very noisy" or something. You're like, "Yeah, we're standing outside a cricket ground next to a generator and like a giant air conditioning unit because this is the only place we can shoot without getting shot ourselves. Like we're doing what we can with the resources that we have. On location recording is not always that friendly.
I was going to say that I think that's sometimes part of the charm. Like, I'm not going to lie. I often wish we had the resources to have a beautiful professional studio set up and that, we could, but we're not co-located. That's the first handbrake on that. We're together probably 70 or 80 days a year and we record, and we record 365 days a year, not literally, but we're probably making up to 290 to 300 shows a year now, just on the way the rhythm of the Final Word works with different programs that we're committed to and so on. But the rough and ready way is kind of us, right? It was that way in the tavern stand at the very beginning, and it's that way now. It was that way a couple of weeks ago when you and Barat were recording in a hammock. A couple of nights ago when I was with Daniel at the Oval, we're recording this a little bit before it goes out. I'm sure that won't be a surprise. When our lapel mics didn't work, I'm like, all right, well, that's annoying, and we'll have to find a different way to get the audio linked with the video and all that other boring stuff that needs to happen behind the scenes. And these days it takes a bit of a village, right? We've got not just you and me as the principals of the operation, but so many different co-hosts who've done so many episodes in our name. Mentioned Daniel, who's probably the third most regular host across the journey, along with Barat, who might be the fourth most. And then I think about people like Izzy Westbury, Cam Ponsonby, more recently Ben Jones. We've had so many different people who've chipped in for an episode here or 5 episodes there. It's a really big community or family of co-hosts now, and they've all embraced the spirit of what we were trying to do at the very start. Yeah,
and it's something I've had this latent idea of wanting to do some kind of archive project on everybody who's been on the show and everybody who's hosted the show and those different categories. They're all things that maybe if I get time at some point, but there's always something else that's coming up. And then most particularly the community of people who back it in. Patrons started up probably 6 years ago as well, and that the show wouldn't have got going without that initial support. That's what meant that we could literally just pay the bills for the things we had to, the subscriptions that we needed and the travel that we needed and all that sort of thing to be able to put it together. And all these years later, we've still got this core of support from people who also, it's not just the financial support, but it's feeling like people actually give a shit about what you're making. That there is a receptive audience. There's an audience online who want to chat about the episodes and talk to us about what's going on and make us feel like we're not just shouting into the void and occasionally getting yelled at back.
Yeah, I mean, it's authentically the case that, like, friends for life in a lot of cases. Some of my best mates now who I spend heaps of time with, playing cricket with or whatever it is, we found each other through, basically being patrons or through being listeners to the show. And there's that great community, people organising tickets together, accommodation together, meeting up around the world. We're part of that, but we're not like central to it. I'm really proud of the fact that the Discord community, for instance, you and I are there, but it's where we're amongst equals there. Where just because we host the show doesn't mean our opinions are any more important than anyone else's there. There's an egalitarian sort of sense to it, and friendships that have formed over years. And I know we thank and are grateful for our patrons, and we very earnestly say that they're our lifeblood all the time. And patreon.com/thefinalword, no better time to sign up than right now, coming into an extraordinarily expensive Ashes series.
10 years ago would have been a better time, but now 10 years, well, we didn't have it 10 years ago, but get involved for the second 10 years.
Get indeed for the second 10, because these things don't get any cheaper. In fact, it gets a lot more expensive when you're running a business with, that's what we do now, right? We run a business with staff. We have people like Ehantharajah and Nick Tuvey who work full time for us, DC who contracts to us, and others who freelance as hosts. Everybody gets paid. Nobody does this, and we're proud of that. Everybody who does a minute's work on the Final Word is paid for their labor, and that essentially is patron, right? So that's how these things work, and the vagaries of commercial relationships, as brilliant as they've been, and we're so grateful to all of our commercial partners over the years, not least at the moment Morris Blackburn and New Brew and the Lord's Tabs, who are kind of a different relationship because of course we raise money for them, but they're these are really deep and meaningful things for us. But if not for the patron community, there'd be there'd be no point having commercial partners because we wouldn't be able to pay the bills. So, it's bigger picture. That stuff has made such a big difference. And, every time you hear a big interview on the show, the great and the good of the cricket world have been on our program. I don't even want to start name checking them all, but so many people have come through the doors and sort of bared their soul to us. That wouldn't have happened without Patreon, because we wouldn't be doing 4, 5, 6 episodes a week. We'd be making 1 episode a week whilst we'd be hustling, doing everything else to remain members of the cricket media.
Really?
Yeah. We wouldn't be we could not do this. It would be you and me catching up when we could, like any other cricket podcast, like a lot of them that are out there. But the fact that we can go the extra yard is purely down to the support we get weekly and monthly, and that means the world to us.
So, should we do it? Are we ready to hit the button? You go.
I think so. I kind of feel like I want to thank more people. But I think people know. I think people know fundamentally that we do love doing this. It's hard yakka a lot of the time, but it should be. We don't take it for granted. None of this. So yeah, thank you to everyone for making these first 10 years quite remarkable, really, and being big parts of our lives. We wouldn't have it any other way now. I've got no interest in doing anything other than this. What a weird place to be that, by the time this goes out, I'll be turning 41 in a couple of days. And we've had so many conversations about our own lives on here and how things have changed, and, marriage and kids in my case, and other things
that's a pretty wild thought. That's a quarter of your life you've been making.
It is
this podcast.
It is, but in your case, moving countries and different things that we've elected to do in our lives. And I know recently that episode that went out a few days ago with Benny Howe, and talking about neurodivergence and other parts of, you would never think that when this all began that it would be that the filter to talk about so many varied and different things. And that's hopefully what stands us apart in what we try and do as often as we do. So forever grateful.
Well, way back when, it was a show that was going out after the test match and talking about what had happened and who should get picked for the next one and all of the usual stuff. But you know what? I quite enjoyed listening to back to this. So this is the pilot. This is the one that was sent out to try to convince some people in management to give us a shot. And, it kind of worked. Vithushan, Ehantharajah, Will Macpherson, Adam Collins, and me. Go on, let's go back 10 years.
Let's do it.